we'll go ahead and jump right in because I know time is of the essence. We've got about a minute until the top of the hour. Once again, it's great to see you here. My name is Kristine Brown, Director of Member Engagement at the Reno+Sparks Chamber. And again, we are welcoming our friend, Jim McClenahan here, who again will be able to effortlessly and concisely wrap up everything you need to know about strategic planning with a bow at that at the end of this session, we're sure. But today, in all seriousness, we're tackling the topic of living your mission. And just a quick reminder, if you missed the first session on strategic planning, you can find that on our YouTube page and you can watch it anytime, whenever it's convenient. Just throw it on when you're cooking dinner at night, when you're working out, whatever the case may be. It's a valuable session to partake in. So we do encourage you to do that. So again, we are in the middle of this Chamber EDU Business 101 series. I know a lot of you have joined us for several calls, and for that, I am so grateful. And I hope that there's some new faces here as well. We do ask that everyone just stay muted during the presentation. And then we encourage you to unmute and share your video at the end of the call when we take questions, because these calls are meant to be interactive, at least as interactive as we can be in a virtual format. You can always use the chat box if you're more comfortable doing that as well, but we do like to see your faces and hear your voices if you're comfortable with that. Human connection is important, and coming up on a year of being isolated makes that even more crucial and more timely. So again, please feel free to interact with us. With that, I just have a couple other announcements for you about upcoming Chamber EDU sessions. We've got some great marketing calls coming up. I encourage you to visit our website to check out what we've got going on. We have one about integrated marketing and knowing how and when to pivot and pivot again, as we've all had to do during this crisis, with KPS3, a local marketing agency who they really are one of the premier agencies here in our region, and their expertise is not only valued, but needed. So I hope that you'll join us for those 2 sessions coming up. We've also got one on mental health in the workplace, resources that you can offer your employees at your organizations to help them to provide the care that they need when it comes to mental health. We've also got one on copywriting, which again is kind of a niche, but we're really excited to offer that one. If you're curious on how to write better copy for your social media posts, any kind of online marketing or print marketing that you're doing, that should be a good session as well. So that's all the announcements I have for you, and I'll go ahead and turn it over to Jim.
Thank you very much. Let me just share my screen. So I like the kind of the title of this is aligning mission. And when we talk about aligning mission, we're really implementing strategically. So we're going to talk about today some strategic implementation, some things that you need to do in goal setting that all are driven from your mission. So it's great to be back with the Chamber. I hope you enjoyed Dean Mosier last week when we were deciding how we wanted to split up this plan. He says, "Oh, I want to talk about mission because I don't want to talk about anything else." And I said, "Oh, okay." And for those of you that were on the call last week, when he talked about going west, if I had a nickel for every time he told me to go west, I would be a rich man. So he really lives up to what he said in that presentation. That is my reality that I live with. So let's jump in. Mission is really the core to every organization. And since Kendall has her video on, I'm probably going to pick on Ed Alliance all morning long. If you look at nonprofits, especially the Chamber, especially nonprofits like Ed Alliance, it's all about the mission. So everything that they do, every action they take, everything that, if you look at just what the Chamber has done, Ann sends out the newsletters on a weekly basis during COVID. That is because the mission of the Chamber is to connect small businesses and be a resource to small businesses. So it inspires actions. And the goals that we set, it requires that to be a reflection of what our mission is. So that's why everything in our strategic plan always goes back to mission. And I'm in a group right now that they asked me to work on their plan, and I asked all the members, "Hey, can you tell me what the purpose is of this group?" and nobody could articulate it. And so some other folks on the board are saying, well, how come it's taken so long to write this strategic plan? Well, because no one has an idea what the mission is. If you don't know your mission, nothing else works. So that's why we did it last week, and I'm starting with it this week because it really is the core piece. And I want to pick on planning versus strategic planning, because there's some things that we do really, really well as business leaders, and that is planning. So when we talk about planning, we're looking at controlling costs and operations. So if you look at a budget, traditionally a year-over-year budget, we're usually pretty good at coming in at budget or close to budget, unless something really bizarre happens like COVID-19. But typically on boards that I've been on, it's not an issue coming in at budget. And you can look at your own business and think, how well did I manage my costs this year? And if nothing unusual happened in the market, usually you manage your costs pretty well. Strategic planning, if you want to think about it a different way, looks at what compels customers to buy, or what compels customers to engage with us. That is a much different proposition than how I manage my costs. So if I think about strategic planning about what is compelling customers to buy, now I'm really doing a forecast on the revenue side of my business, which is something that I can't control as much. I have a lot of competition. I have a lot of external factors. So planning, we can really control. Strategic planning is where we're going to forecast, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So as you're putting your plan together, Dean Mosier talked about President Glick, who was the president of UNR several years ago, and he liked strategic planning light. I would say it's not strategic planning light, but he had it on an index card. And if you can put your strategic plan on an index card, it means it's simple and everyone will understand it. Because you have to make sure everyone is buying into the mission. Because if I am working at the chamber, or if I'm a chamber member, or if I'm on the board of Ed Alliance or working with Ed Alliance, I have to believe 100% in the mission that they have. So I should know the mission. And then I should know 2 or 3 of the high-level goals, and I should understand what our unique value proposition is. And I'm going to talk about the unique value proposition in just a second. So I want it simple, and I want it to focus on revenue decision makers. So that's a phrase that I stole from an article that I'll share with you at the end. Revenue decision makers are just customers. Could be members, but they're customers. And we have to figure out where we want to play. So which ones of these revenue decision makers are we going to target? And then we have to understand how to win. And that's our unique value proposition. So as we look at our goals, those are the things that we're trying to figure out. It's not usually about, okay, how can I need to cut costs by 3%. That can be an important business decision, but it's not really strategic. Strategic is about growing and shrinking my revenue pie. I may decide to exit a certain avenue of business, or I might decide to expand a certain avenue of business to adapt to whatever my competitive environment is. Those elements are really good, juicy pieces for a strategic plan. And then as we write this down, this is going to be a plan that is for 3 years or 4 years. I wouldn't really go much beyond that. You want to document everything, and you want to document your thought process. And it's a little bit like keeping a journal. I always tell students when they go out on their first jobs, make sure you keep a journal. Write things down as they happen, because cognitively, we kind of miss the steps along the way. We miss the pieces of the journey. And you want to write down, okay, I'm targeting this specific customer group. Here's why I'm doing that. Because a year from now, when something is not working, you want to go back and see, oh, that was my thought process. Oh, I did that because of this. Well, wait a minute. That shopping center never even opened. No wonder I'm having trouble. I need to readjust. So I like to leave a trail of breadcrumbs for myself. And I find as I get older, you can't remember anything. So you have to leave a trail of breadcrumbs for yourself. It works the same way when you're writing your strategic plan. So when we talk about strategy, strategy is not about perfection, it's about making bets. So Roger Martin is a prolific writer on strategic planning, and I'll share his article with you at the end. He is the dean of the Rotman School of Business at the University of Toronto. It's one of the top 10 business schools in the world. And it's actually a place that Dean Mosier and I visit with students every summer when you can travel. And what he's really trying to say here is that there's nothing certain about what we're doing. We are truly making a forecast. We are making a bet. So if we were a restaurant in November of 2019 and we decided, you know what, we're going to beef up our delivery and our takeout, and we're going to create some outdoor dining areas, and we're going to put some heaters in there. If we did that in November of 2019, people would have thought we were crazy. But by April of 2020, people would have thought we were geniuses. No one made that bet in November, but a lot of people made that pivot in April. And that's the difference. They were making a bet that, hey, we can continue our business. We can grow our business by doing these things. And if this pandemic lasts a long time, boy, we've made a significant investment. We're going to be okay. Well, those people that made those bets made the right bet. The pandemic did last a long time. So that's why when we talk about strategy, we're always guessing to a degree, but we want to make the most educated guess we can that will get us the best results that align with our mission. So I mentioned the unique value proposition. Unique value proposition, unique sales proposition. You'll hear them similarly mentioned. And if you've ever seen Alice Hyman speak at a chamber event or other events, she talks about this a lot. Your unique value proposition is, why should someone do business with you instead of a competitor? And what are the benefits of your products or services? So I can take you back in time to when there was a Sparks chamber and there was a Reno chamber. And it's been a long time, probably 10 years. And the Reno chamber at that time was kind of the big business chamber. And the Sparks chamber at the time was kind of the small business chamber. The Reno chamber did lots of big events, and the Sparks chamber did lots of small networking events. They each found their niche in an area, and they had a lot of people that were members of both chambers. So if I was the Sparks chamber, I would say, if there was a small business, why you should do business with the Sparks chamber instead of the Reno chamber is that we're the largest small business organization in Nevada. It's how I tell my story. And ultimately, that's what drove the two chambers to merge, probably 10 years ago, 11 years ago, or longer ago. Those two value propositions came together. So you can think about that in terms of nonprofits. So Kendall, there's not a lot of other Ed Alliances, but there are certainly a lot of other nonprofits that deal in the education space. Why should someone engage with Ed Alliance than some other education nonprofit? And if you look at, when you see press releases from Ed Alliance or news stories about Ed Alliance, what Kendall's unique value proposition is how Ed Alliance directly engages with the school district and with individual schools, and it's always tied to student success. And other nonprofits may try to do the same thing, but Kendall does that really, really well. So when she's telling her story, that's the story that she is telling. And that helps in the nonprofit world, helps with fundraising, helps with getting grants, helps with all sorts of things. But you have to be able to articulate why someone should do business with you and what the benefits are. And, went ahead too fast. When we're talking about benefits, we're not just saying, oh, well, my stool has 4 legs, not just 3 legs. That's why it's better. No, we want to talk about what really you're bringing to the table. And people are saving money. They're getting better quality of life. We're seeing a better outcome in the case of Ed Alliance with education. In the case with the Chamber, membership is growing. We are helping businesses do a better job of working more efficiently, giving them the resources that they need, advocating for them with the legislature. It becomes really easy to articulate those value propositions. So that's what I'm talking about with the unique value proposition. You need to think about what that is. What is the story that you're telling? Because as you're trying to identify those future revenue decision makers, you're gonna do that with people that align with your unique value proposition. So, and I've said this before already, it has to align with your mission. So your UVP is short and sweet, your mission is short and sweet. It shouldn't have a lot of buzzwords, it shouldn't have a lot of jargon, it shouldn't just be a slogan, but it should really talk about why you are different and why people should do business with you. And I'll give you an example of that. So this is something I found on a website. If it gets you there, it's in the app. Shared rides, bikes, scooters, fancy cars, public transit. There's a lot to do in your city. And we've got the rides to do it. And I saw this and I thought, well, that's Uber. No, it is not Uber. Uber has actually gone a completely different direction. And so when I saw this, I was curious. I wanted to dig a little bit more. This is actually Lyft. So Lyft has differentiated themselves from Uber. You know, in my mind, Uber, Lyft, it's all the same. Where Uber has kind of spread out, oh, we're going to do delivery of food, and we're going to get into all sorts of other areas. Lyft really vertically integrated themselves. You want to rent a bike, you want to rent a scooter, you want to deal with public transit, Lyft is your company. That is their unique value proposition. And they do have a slogan, if it gets you there, it's in the app. Well, that's kind of interesting. And then the narrative describes it. So that's what you need to be thinking about for your organization as you're doing your strategic planning. And if all you did was come up with mission, what your unique value proposition was, and one or two goals, you are far ahead of people that are so caught up in the day-to-day operation that they don't step back and look at this. Dean Mosier talked about SWOT analysis, and he said it's kind of an old-fashioned tool. And it may be an old-fashioned tool, but boy, is it helpful. Strengths and weaknesses give you an internal look at your business. And we are always looking at a SWOT based on how do you look versus your competition, or who is your competition. So if I'm the Chamber, because I was thinking about this in terms of the Chamber when I was writing it, you know, who's my competition? It's not really EDON. Well, kind of sort of is, but not really. And there are some smaller chambers that are around. It's not really them either. But you need to always be thinking about this, because there could be a business organization that rises up and says, I'm going to challenge the Chamber. And the Chamber needs to be ready to respond. So strengths, what gives your organization an advantage over its competitors? Weaknesses, what is relatively disadvantageous towards your competitors? And if you're in the nonprofit space, you know, Kendall might not be trying to think, oh, I'm trying to put these other nonprofits out of business. No. But what is it about Ed Alliance that is special compared to another educational organization? I'm the chairman of the board of Junior Achievement, completely different in terms of mission, but both engaged in education. And if she's thinking about it in strengths and weaknesses, that might give some help, but really it's in the external focus, the opportunities and threats. When I'm looking at opportunities externally, who can I partner with? Who is complementary to my organization? So now it's not competition, it's about cooperation. The rising tide floats all boats. So when I'm thinking about opportunities, I'm trying to figure out who can I partner with, who is got the same passion a similar mission? How can we tackle these big problems together? So I'm really looking at opportunities for things that are external that I might be able to take advantage of. I know there is a bill in the legislature to create or to allow tech companies to be their own governments in rural areas. I don't know a lot about this bill. I've just heard a couple of news stories on it. I think that's interesting. I don't know if I'm excited about it or terrified of it. I'm probably a little of both. But if I'm a business owner, I really want to know what that opportunity means. How could that change things? How can I take advantage of that? So opportunities always come from something external that's going on. Similarly, threats come from things that are external. And we'll talk a little bit about managing risk in just a second. But as I think about threats, you're always worried about regulatory changes. What regulatory changes could harm my business? What if suddenly we move to a $15 minimum wage? How would that impact my business? Those are important things to think about because they are all things that have been discussed and that are on the horizon. Good, bad, or indifferent, you have to be ready from a business standpoint with what could really upset my apple cart. If I own a small hardware store and suddenly a Home Depot opens up around the corner, that's a significant threat to my hardware store. How am I going to align what I do to compensate for the fact that Home Depot is right next door? So I think that strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats is an important tool. Yep, it's been out there for a long time. Yep, it's a little bit dated, but it still gives me really good intel to do my plan. So as you're thinking about your goals, I want you to think about now and 5 years from now. And by now, I mean, who is your customer now? Who's your customer 5 years from now? If I'm in gaming, if I'm running a slot floor, this is a really important question as our demographic ages. So knowing who my customer is, what they look like, and what my customer could be, it's reasonable to assume we're going to get a lot of people from urban areas moving into Northern Nevada because it's a really nice place to live. That because working remotely is now going to be part of the world, that's going to change who my customer is. So I should be ready for that between now and 5 years from now. When I'm looking at the landscape, I want to know what is going on in my industry. What is going on in my organization now and 5 years from now that could change? How could my product evolve? How could my service evolve? Where should I be expanding? Where should I be contracting? Should I be opening another location? It's all really important things to think about, both in a today and, okay, what about 5 years from now? Don't worry about the budget yet, because if the need is compelling, we're going to have to figure out the budget, because if we don't, there's a risk that we might not be here, which takes us to opportunities. What are the opportunities now and 5 years from now? What can we be taking advantage of? What should we be advocating for? It'll be interesting to see how the area around the university changes. So there's a lot that has been cleared at the corner of 9th and Sierra, 9th and Center, which is the site of a new business building. It's a long story short, and I could tell you how a whole year of my life was devoted to that project, but at some point that project's going to get built. That's going to change that southern end of campus. So if someone is looking at student housing, and there's already some student housing that's down there, that's going to change things. If someone's looking at a restaurant, that's going to change things. If somebody who owns that Jimmy John's building is thinking what's going to happen, well, it's the university now owns the building. Jimmy John's is going to have to relocate, which is tragic because that's where I get lunch at least once a week. So if I'm the owner of Jimmy John's, I have a big change coming at some point. So that's what I mean by opportunities now and 5 years from now. So as I look at goals, I'm talking 3 to 5 goals, and I'll go through this sort of quickly because I'm running out of time. Customer focus today and 5 years from now. We just talked about that. Competitive landscape today and 5 years from now. Opportunities and threats. But most importantly, what is the process that I'm using to identify what customer segments are growing and what customer segments are shrinking? And it's not the fact, I don't care about the who as much because I've already focused on that, but I care more about my process because I need to make sure I'm doing that all the time. It all has to align with my mission. I have to find a way to measure it. That's next week, in next week's presentation. But if I can't control my costs and manage that part of my business, this part is probably irrelevant. So the planning side is really, really important. And as you think about next week, when we talk about implementation, how often are you going to report your progress? Who are you going to report it to? How are you going to revise your goals? Please don't ever lock up your strategic plan in a shelf and never open it again, because this is something we have to look at it. Market conditions are always changing. Just look at what the last year has done to us. And then you need to figure out your process for how you're going to decide and delegate responsibilities for implementation. You probably cannot do it all, but you're going to have some people that are helping you. And so if you're having people help you, how are we going to report back? That goes back to goal number 1. So the implementation piece, again, this just doesn't sit. We have to actively work on whatever our goals are. So my goal was 30 minutes. I made it in 28. If you are interested, The Big Lie of Strategic Planning by Roger Martin was in the Harvard Business Review of January 2014. Great article. And if you're looking for a great book, I mentioned this earlier, it's Strategic Planning for Dummies by Erica Olson. Now, you might think, the dummies books. This is a great book. I've used it all the time over the years. And Erica is a local consultant, although she works all over the country, but she is in Reno. So, and I think she actually signed my book.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Jim. Good grief. We could probably, again, talk about this all day, which is very true of all of the presentations that you've done for us so far. But we'll go ahead and just take a couple questions right now. So I invite everyone to go ahead and share your video, share your audio if you're comfortable, or go ahead and use chat in order to address Jim and get your questions answered. I'll go ahead and kick us off with one. And it may be some low-hanging fruit here, but I think it's important. So we talk about the fact that we need to have a simple and defined mission, as well as a unique value proposition. So I'm wondering if you can really clarify and hone in on the distinct differences between these two things and why we really do need both.
And sometimes they can overlap. So I don't want to scare people into thinking, oh, I have to write two things. But the mission of the College of Business, is going to be different than our unique value proposition. The mission of the Chamber, you could probably articulate that, Kristine, because I'm sure it's changed since I think we originally wrote a three-legged stool: education, networking, and advocacy were the three things that we would talk about with the Chamber. That tells me, okay, what tent am I playing in? Where am I focusing my efforts? What it also tells me, if somebody says, hey, so I'll just pick on Kendall again because she's got her video on. Hey, Kendall, would you mind helping us fundraise money for our new College of Business building? Well, Kendall might be really excited about that, but that has nothing to do with the mission of the Education Alliance. So she's going to use her mission to say, yeah, I'd love to. I might be able to introduce you to some people, but it's really outside the scope of where Education Alliance exists. And that's what we're really talking about with mission, is defining your scope. With your unique value proposition, you're almost always framing that around, what do I do better than a competitor? Why should someone come to me instead of a competitor? So where the College of Business mission is certainly engaging students that want to pursue a business career, engaging a community that is anxious to work with those students. When I talk about my unique value proposition, I'm going to talk about my success relative to my competition, which might be Sac State or UC Davis or UNLV in some areas. In fact, if you look at business schools, we always have peers that we compare ourselves to and aspirant peers, other universities that we would like to be, that we aspire to be. So that kind of helps guide us. And I think that's an interesting practice in higher education that companies can use in their unique value proposition. This is why you should do business with me. Why should I go to Carter Brothers Hardware instead of Home Depot? Because I can walk into Carter Brothers and say, hey, I'm looking for this widget. It's about this big. And they will find 5 widgets and they'll go, oh yeah, that was the one. And that would never have worked at Home Depot. Not that there's anything wrong with Home Depot, but their value proposition is a personalized level of service at Carter Brothers. And I don't know if Carter Brothers is a chamber member, and if they're not, darn it, they should be, because we just gave them a free commercial.
Yes, everyone should be a chamber member.
Of
Absolutely. Nailed it. Great. Thank you so much for making that differentiation, because I think, we have all of these terms rattling in our heads: mission, unique value proposition, your vision, your goals. I mean, there's so many elements that create a big picture, and it's important to understand which each one of them serves. So thank you very much for clarifying that. What other questions are out there? Please go ahead, fire away.
I get to go because I got picked on the most. Jim, I have to tell you, it's so great to see you. By the way, I'm a 1985 COBA grad, so, fundraising for the building, you just never know.
We'll be in touch.
I'm an alum. Anyway, I totally agree on the collaboration part of it. Rising tides raise all ships, especially in our community. Our community is so tight. It's wonderful about that. But my question is, we're working on our mission right now and our strategic plan. We've been around since the late 80s, a long time. We're really proud of our collaborations with UNR and TMCC. That's super important to us for that pathway. So when we're working on our mission, you had said, inspires actions, it defines our scope. Do we need to include all the people that we collaborate with in that? I mean, sometimes we feel compelled to say, in collaboration with, we do this, this is our scope, but sometimes it seems like it gets extensively long. And is that the important part of the mission, or do we just hone right in on it and say, this is what we do?
Well, so you're kind of a unique animal, Kendall, at Alliance. So what I would say is, if I was working on your plan, I would keep your mission really short and sweet. And I would say we through collaboration with great community partners. And then I would have a whole page in your strategic plan that just listed, here are the great community partners that we work with. So that as CEO communicating to your board, that they are aware that you have these great community partners. And if that was ever shared externally, then your community partners would see they're an integral part of your plan. So that so it keeps your mission really focused, but you have to recognize that you don't exist without all those partners, and that is part of your unique value proposition.
Right.
Because this is where you are engaged versus someone else that would try to come in and do the same thing.
Excellent.
Does that make sense?
Makes perfect sense. Thank you. I don't want to leave anybody out. That's my thing.
Right.
Thank you.
All right.
Yeah, I have a question. Yeah, I have a question. Going back to the missing piece of the journal, you said keep a journal. My question is, how do you stay consistent with keeping that journal? Because there's been many times where I start if I'm at a company, I'll start with a journal and I'll start getting into it, and then as the business picks up, as things keep going up, I just tend to forget about, entering in that journal. And I don't know if that's just that, the beginning, this is a new job. This is not like you want to start doing that stuff. But yeah, how do you stay consistent with that journaling?
I have struggled with this for years, Stefan. So I'm really glad you asked that question. So, and I always feel a little bit bad because if I'm telling the students going on an internship, trying to figure out, do I like working in finance? I tell them always keep a journal, every week. And if they're doing it for credit, I make them turn it in. I don't read it. It forces them to actually do the assignment because it leaves breadcrumbs for yourself. What I have found that works for me, because I'm involved in something now where I have to keep a journal, I put a calendar entry on my calendar. And that helps me be mindful that, okay, it's Friday at 8 a.m. I need to write something in my journal about what's gone on this week. And I know that there's some people who travel with notebooks and pens, and they are always ready to write something down in their journal. What I have yellow pads always nearby. And so my journal might be just me writing in my yellow pad, and I'll drop it into the little book that I'm using in the journal. And because it doesn't matter how clean it is, what matters is that I'm actually documenting my thoughts and I can go back and reference them at some point. So that everyone is a little bit different. When I am next to my journal at that time that I'm writing, I also have a really good pen that I really like. And that sounds ridiculous, but I have to have a good pen. And if I have a good pen, it just makes the job go easier. I'm a blue ink guy, not a black ink guy, and I don't like gel pens. So I get really fussy about my pens. Don't ask, that's a personality flaw.
There you go. Well, thank you.
No, that's a really good point. Any way you can incentivize the behavior that you're trying to reinforce, that's going to drive it home. I mean, if it means, you get to eat a cookie every time you journal, whatever the case may be, incentivizing behavior is always a way to drive it home. I have a really quick question about making bets. I think this was, at least for me in your presentation, kind of the sleeper hit of guidance here. When we're talking about making bets, of course, we want them to be educated guesses. We want them to be informed. Now, I think the place, I can't speak for everyone, but I think for me, and since we have a lot of industries represented here, a lot of organizations represented here, and it may not be a consistent answer for everyone, but in a general sense, where do you go to find valid, verifiable information that informs those decisions? What data points do you specifically look at in order to make those kinds of decisions?
So it's such a great question, and it really varies depending on your industry. So, Mike Hicks is making bets every single day. That's part of the job. When any time a financial institution is doing loans, they have different factors that they're looking at. And they are in essence making a bet on that particular business. Now, the premium for risk that they charge for that bet is the interest rate. So that's going to be how someone in banking looks at that. If I'm at Alliance or the Chamber, what I want to know is, for Kendall, what does her donor profile look like? And how can that donor profile start to change? How do you measure that? And so if, let's say, Ed Alliance was driven by corporate donations that had 100 or more people, well, then she's going to want to gather data on how many companies are moving into Reno with 100 or more people that have a passion in education. And there's all sorts of ways that you can find that data. EDON certainly has that data, and there's some economic research groups on campus that have that data. Brian Bonifant runs the economic research group in the Small Business Development Center, Center for Regional Studies. Boy, if I forgot that, I was going to be in big trouble. That is something that you'd have to figure out. If I'm opening a restaurant, I'm going to want to know about income. I'm going to want to know about disposable income. How many people live near my restaurant? What's the traffic at the corner of my restaurant? How's the parking? And then how is all that going to change? And are 10 other restaurants going to move in that time? So depending on what industry I'm in, how I'm gathering that data and doing that market research to make that bet, that's really the secret sauce. And you can talk to any real estate developer. That's how they make their living, trying to figure out those equations. But from a business standpoint, that's how you would. It's going to be, what are the drivers of your business?
Absolutely. It's interesting because I think at least what resonates from what you're saying right now is really simple. And it's that there is a lot that can be found in the simple act of being curious, the simple act of, walking into your place of business or walking into or looking at your revenue sources with fresh eyes, or inviting people with different perspectives and different viewpoints to take a look at what you've got, to see, where those opportunities really lie. I think the more we can, rather than assume, ask good questions is always going to benefit our business and organization. We've got a really good question in chat, and it's interesting because it sounds very much like something that we may address at our next call, which is a shameless plug for our next call, but I'll go ahead and fire it away here. I always find it hard to measure or report on success of goals. How do you measure success without assigning a number, such as percentage of revenue or number of customers, or how many sales, especially if you aren't selling a product, but instead offering a service? I think we're talking about measuring the intangible.
Yeah, so there are quantifiable things, like the things that are listed there, and there are qualitative things that are listed there. So if you're offering a service, one of the things that you want to know is, how good are you at that service? So let's look at the Chamber. We know, and I'll paint with a broad brush, Kristine, because I know it's changed. 90% of the members of the Chamber were 10 employees or less. And that's probably still pretty close, I'm guessing. Roughly.
We actually have seen an uptick in bigger companies joining in the last year in particular, but yes, we've got a lot of folks who have between 2 and 10 employees.
So if I'm the Chamber, and this is the world that Kristine lives in, how good are we at providing the services and support that our members expect? How good are we at delivering that? And the way that we gather that data is we do a survey. So that is how you live or die. Now, the other way that you'll find out is, gee, why did 30% of our members cancel their membership this month? That's a problem. So in a service business like that, you're always looking at, how many new members do we have? How many members canceled their membership? And why are they canceling their membership? So again, that's a qualitative data point. Depending on your goal, you're always going to want to look at some things that you can quantify, but also some things that are more qualitative in nature. You always want to ask why. And so sometimes it's doing a survey. If I'm running a service business, things like Yelp and Google reviews are really important. And then I hear, well, there are people that just go out on Yelp and badmouth businesses. And yeah, that's probably true. But it doesn't mean that you shouldn't engage. Doesn't mean you shouldn't look at it as a data point. So things like that become really important. The challenge to the question is, qualitative research is always harder. It always takes more time. It's always more work. And it's always hard to get people to participate. So, but that is how I would look at it. Although I would argue in a service business, you can still look at your revenue. You can still look at sales, because that's really what you're providing. Even in a nonprofit, Kendall is looking at donations and grants, how they vary every year. So that's a quantitative metric that is very important.
Absolutely. And some qualitative feedback, some anecdotal feedback to that is, you know, since I started conducting regular surveys here at the Chamber, it's not only become a behavior that members are expecting, but it's something that people are becoming a little bit less hesitant to participate in. We're seeing bigger engagement numbers with surveys as opposed to fewer. So that's really encouraging, and we're getting a really good mix of quantitative and qualitative data from those surveys. So pro survey, I encourage surveys across the board for everyone.
Make surveys easy and fast
Yes.
for people.
100%.
I like the sad face, flat face, happy face scale.
Yeah, Square uses that, and it works for them. Absolutely. Perfect. All right, everyone. We are over time, but it's always for a good reason. So thank you so much for hanging with us and for sticking with us for the last 45 minutes. Again, same time next week. We hope to see you for the third installment in our strategic planning series with Jim. And until we see each other again, thank you so much and have a great day.
Bye, Kendall. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Have a good day.